Hey, it's Michael here with Oilers Live. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast. It's been a successful first season. As I enter into season number 2, a lot of exciting changes. Of course, you may already know that Oilers Live will be doing live broadcasts this season. It looks to be like we will do them Thursdays, post-game. And if there's no game on Thursdays, we'll probably do them about 10 p.m. Mountain Time. It include a chance for everybody, listeners, to call in. They can stream live off the Oilers Live website. That's OILERSLIVE Podcast.com. On this episode today, I had Ken from Sinbin.Vegas. Ken's one of the founders of Sinbin.Vegas. They're credentialed press for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. So we got to chat a little bit about Jason Garrison, who's coming in under a PTO. He played, of course, 8 games with Las Vegas last season. So a little bit of that. Talk a little bit about Sabiza, because he's not signed anywhere yet. And, a couple other things hockey-related. Anyway, thanks for listening. Look forward to the upcoming Season 2 in a couple weeks' time. Most of the Oilers will be in Edmonton for training camp. So hoping to debut the Heavy Hockey Podcast, too. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, enjoy the show. Oilers Live Podcast. Michael here from Oilers Live Podcast. I've got Ken from Sinbin.Vegas with me. Welcome back, Ken.
Thanks for having me.
So you're a full season in now as a NHL credentialed press man, and also as a hockey fan, no doubt. First, I just want to say congrats to the Vegas Golden Knights, and congrats to Sinbin.Vegas. Must have been a pretty exciting season for you.
Thank you very much. I never would have thought that in year 1 I would be covering the Stanley Cup final, but that's what it was. Pretty wild.
Yeah. So if I recall, and I meant to listen to the podcast I had you on, you had a little wager going on, right? And that you were going to learn to skate if they won so many games or something along that
85 points, yeah. If you type in Kenny on ice on our website, for whatever reason, I went by Kenny for that, and I'm still not thrilled about that. But yeah, if you type that in, it was an absolute disaster. I wouldn't say that I know how to skate, but we did it. I geared up in full pads and everything, and went out there and looked like a jackass, and it was a sight to behold.
Right on. Well, glad to hear that you've been now out on the ice, and you know what? I'm sure there are worse things than hitting 85 points and getting out there and skating, doing playing some hockey.
And now I've been convinced that every year we're going to have to do it, that they get 85 points. So I think we might be in for a string of me getting out there once a year for a little bit here, because I think they're going to be pretty good for a while.
Yeah, well, so maybe 4 or 5 years from now, we can get you on a rec team or something. And
I don't know about that.
So I wanted to get you on today because, as you know, the Oilers have signed Jason Garrison to a PTO. And, of course, the last team he played for was the Golden Knights. He didn't play a lot of games, so I'm not going to expect too much from you today, but I wanted to get a feel. I've gone back and I've watched the condensed games that he played. I went back and I see in January you wrote a little article on Jason Garrison in terms of, how the waiver system worked, et cetera. First off, what's your thought on him? Did you talk to him at all during the season? Do you remember him playing? Do you remember much about him?
Yeah, I mean, he's a great guy. He dealt very well with the situation that was at hand for him. I think when he came in, I thought most people, including him, expected that he was going to be a full-time member of the Golden Knights, and I think they thought he was going to be in their 6 defensemen that were going to play a majority of the season. And then as the first week or two went on, he kind of slipped out of the rotation. Shea Theodore found his way back in, and it winds up being a situation where they waive him, and it was basically in favor of John Merrill and Brad Hunt, which I think kind of says something about Jason Garrison at this point. I think he's a player that years ago he was very useful. Years ago he was actually a pretty strong offensive piece for a time there. But
yeah,
now,
he did a few seasons. Yeah,
the father time just kind of caught up with him. He doesn't skate the way he used to skate. And I think that's kind of put him in a position where he's not necessarily sure of himself anymore going forward. He doesn't pinch nearly as much as what I think he wanted to or used to in his past. And he's kind of just, I would be surprised if he makes that roster.
Yeah. And, if he does, he's looking probably at a seventh spot. There's no doubt there. It could have been a favor maybe to somebody for him to go on a PTO so he gets a look, anywhere in the league. Everybody gets the chance to see him play.
Yep.
Do you think Shea Theodore was that much better, few games in, or was it that Jason Garrison just wasn't cutting it? What's
I think
your
it's
thought
probably
there?
more of that. I think when Theodore first came up, he was kind of trying to get his legs underneath him. He didn't look all that great. But the other thing is, at the time, the Golden Knights weren't expecting to be Pacific Division champions. They weren't expecting to be gearing up for a playoff run. They were really just trying to figure out what type of team they had and how they could utilize all the pieces that they had. So they were really protective of not losing a player like Jason Garrison or Griffin Reinhart's another one that they hung on to a little bit longer than I think most people expected. That the idea was, let's make sure we don't lose a piece on waivers here. So they sent Theodore down. They wind up bringing him back up, and then you're not going to give up on him once he winds up being there. And then eventually, by the time the season was over, Theodore wound up being maybe the second best defenseman on the team.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right in that regard. What the other thing I'm curious about, because it's just a PTO after all, so I don't want to beat the dead horse on this Jason Garrison thing. I mean, he'll get his time in camp, and if he plays, it might be that the Oilers think he's a good vet to have around and a good presence. You had a chance to talk to him. Yeah, he had that going for him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, he was actually named an alternate captain for the Golden Knights to start out the season, and obviously that had to kind of disappear when he went away. But he's the ultimate pros pro. He showed up to the expansion draft. He hung out in the opening of the store the day after the expansion draft. He was all over the place in that first week for the Golden Knights. He kind of was one of the faces of the team when they first got their players. So he really is a good guy. He really is a guy that I think wouldn't be bad to have as your seventh defenseman on the roster. Or if you happen to be a team that wants to keep 8, it might even be better there. So I don't think that he's an awful guy to have around, but I would honestly, and I don't know the depth of the Oilers like I do the Golden Knights, I would be surprised if he's going to crack an NHL roster. Mainly because he lasted on the free agency market so long and then winds up signing a PTO. That kind of tells you something right there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hard for a guy in my mind anyway, at 33, to come into the league after playing, 8 games the year prior. And obviously he didn't get any playoff time while he was waived prior to that, I suppose. So it's, I agree. I heard his interview on one of the local Oilers radio stations, Edmonton radio stations. He sounds like a professional, sounds like a really good guy. I think he knows what he's up against. I guess camp will tell. He did say he trained this offseason as if, he was going to be playing somewhere. So that's good. I mean, he is, as you say, a professional. On another note, Why not Sabisa? What's happening there? Have you heard anything?
I don't know. It's odd. It's a weird situation because when he played at the beginning of the year, and he was kind of the guy with Nate Schmidt at the beginning of the year for a Golden Knights team that had a very good run defensively. If you look through a lot of December and a little bit of January before Lucas Spiza got hurt, he was out there against the best competition. I mean, you can search his name on our site. We wrote an article at the beginning of the year that he was the shutdown guy. Like, whenever the best player came out on the ice, that was the guy that they had him up against. Then the injury happened, and then a second injury happened. And then when he winds up back in there, he hadn't played for a month and a half or so. He's chucked back into playoff hockey, and he was kind of a disaster. And I think that people kind of look back and say, well, that's the Lucas Spiza we're used to, not the one that the Golden Knights had at the beginning of the year. If it were up to me, if it's a PTO of Jason Garrison or Lucas Spiza, it's a no-brainer. But I'm assuming Lucas Spiza is probably sitting there saying, I'm just going to be patient and wait for some team to lose a defenseman early in camp, and then you kind of just slide in there and he'll make double or triple what he probably should because somebody will get desperate.
Well, and to me, that's the Oilers right now, right? I mean, with Sekera out at least for the near term, the only thing that I can see is, the deal that Sabisa wants to sign is maybe larger than most teams would be willing to pay. Maybe
more than a year or two. He might want multiple.
I did read something today that there's a PTO offer out for him, but to me, he's probably one of the biggest surprises that nobody's taken a chance on him, which means to me anyway that probably he's asking for too much right now. He's asking for what 14 points in 30 games translates to in a full season, but we've not ever seen that from him.
Yeah,
right. Like, we've never seen anything more than that historically. But there are some Sabisa fans in Vancouver. I've talked to them, and they believe he's got the tools to do that somewhere. Was there anything in Vegas though that you noticed for him that might have been played into the type of game he plays? Like, was it his pairing, or the forwards he was playing with, or was there anything you noticed?
Not necessarily. I mean, he's going to be your classic stay-at-home defenseman, so you're always going to have fans thinking that he's the worst player ever, because that's what fans think about any stay-at-home defenseman. I will never understand that, but that's the way it goes. Like, every single time. Like, name a player. If they're a stay-at-home defenseman, fans will be like, of course he's terrible. Like, yeah. He also starts 42% of the time in the offensive zone. That's not good. So, it's if 42 for Spiza, actually, he was probably in the 30s at times. So, I mean, he's going to be a guy that when he finds his home, and I think he will find a place, because, again, another great guy, one of my favorite guys to talk to in the locker room. He's your classic stay-at-home defenseman that would be an excellent guy as a penalty killer. That would be an excellent guy to have in the back end of your roster, whether he's in the lineup or not. I would assume he wants 2 years and more than $1 million. So it's not exactly an easy decision for anybody to make. And at this point, when they're going into a season with full health, thinking that some of these young guys are going to beat out some of the older guys to win these jobs, I think some teams are going to get to camp and realize, oh crap, we're one short here, and he's going to be a good option. I don't hate his decision here, though. I think he's doing the right thing, because he's pretty clearly, to me, the best of the available defensemen out there, and being in that position can come with some benefits when things happen early in preseason.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. He's clearly, I do. I'm hesitant to say he's one of the best yet. I mean, we saw him for a number of games. He was good. I didn't find him to be awful in Vancouver. I remember watching him. Of course, the Oilers played Vancouver, quite regularly. He's I think if you look back though, he's only ever played a couple of full seasons. So that could be the knock on him.
No doubt about it. Injuries were an issue here. Every time he got back on the ice, he was out right after it. It was tough.
Yeah. And I do, and maybe you were thinking the same thing. I mean, the Garrison over Sabisa PTO, if Sabisa does end up signing a PTO, and that's who's to say that the Oilers didn't ask him to come.
Probably did.
I guess, yeah, we forget that happens, and sometimes it's declined. He's used to if he's used to Vegas, he's probably not too fond of a good Alberta winter. Yeah, so yeah, we'll see. I wanted to get your opinion on those couple of players. I'd like to get you back in the season for a full episode and do something like that. Want to say, Ken, good job. I followed you after having you on the podcast earlier this year. I've been following Sinbin.Vegas. You've done a fantastic job covering the team and the sport, and really have enjoyed what you've brought to the team or to the game, and I've enjoyed what the Golden Knights have brought to the game. They've certainly changed the manner in which other teams provide entertainment and other things surrounding the game. So it was a fun season, and they certainly gave you and the fans something wonderful to I'd like to say I hope that you see it again, but I really don't. But you got a good team rocking for the next season. When does everybody start getting there? I guess next week, probably.
Yeah, they're starting to file in. There's 6 or 7 guys here at this point, and they'll start probably all starting to file in kind of that first week of September. Camp starts on the 13th. They still got one guy in Theodore unsigned, so I think the fans of Vegas are going to get their first taste of what a camp holdout looks like. So that'll be fun.
Where do you think they finish this year in the Pacific?
I think they're going to win the division again. I don't think the division's all that good. I think it got better. Calgary seemingly got better. I have a hard time believing Edmonton would be as bad as they were. I think the Coyotes are significantly better. Mm-hmm. I think the Ducks are not that good. I don't think the Kings are all that good, and I'm not fully buying in on the Sharks yet. So Vancouver's awful. So I still think that the Golden Knights are, to me, still the class of the division. There's a couple of question marks, but they don't have a lot of change. And I think a lot of people forget that Marc-Andre Fleury missed almost half the season last year. If that doesn't happen, 109 points is what they got. That actually could possibly look low if he would have played 65, 70 games and won the Vezina Trophy like he probably should have if he wasn't injured. So I still think they're a really good team, and I thought the moves that they made them a little bit more reliable defensively, and I don't think they lost too much offensively. Plus, I think there's going to be some guys that are going to step up. Like Alex Tuch's a big one. I think he's going to have a huge year, and that's going to make a huge difference as they go forward. Yeah.
I think, I think you're probably right. Golden Knights are at least looking good right now for, another repeat top of the division. It's unfortunate for the Oilers, but they've got a good team and some nice additions, and while some guys left, I think you're right. I think they've got a good thing. It looks like it's not till November we see the Golden Knights in Edmonton. I'll be at that game, and maybe you and I could plan. That's a weekend. Maybe we could plan to get you back on the podcast before then.
Works for me. I wonder if the Oilers will continue being the Golden Knights' bugaboo.
Well, I hope so.
They were one of the very few teams. I think there were only 2 or 3 teams that beat the Golden Knights twice, and they were in there. So it was not common for teams to give Vegas trouble. So we'll see.
Yeah. I've got some theories on that, and I unfortunately don't have the time tonight to get into them, but it was interesting. I certainly hope that the Oilers. While I don't think they were the team of 2 years ago, I certainly don't think they're the team of last year.
What changed, by the way? I'm interested myself. Like, what was the massive change that made it so that it was like this massive drop off?
So one of the big things I think, I'm a bit of a podcast junkie and not just a podcaster, but any chance I get to listen to an Oiler player or anybody on any podcast, I listen to them. I had listened to Patty Maroon on Spittin' Chicklets and listened to Lucic on there and listen to the guys on the radio in Edmonton. And they're all, whether or not they've talked about it or whatever, I really get the strong sense that they all sort of felt they went into last year thinking it was going to be easy. And it just wasn't, right? And part of my feeling too was, you start out from that, on that high, and then you get sort of put into place early, and they never fully recovered. And then you have another team, an expansion team, come in who's doing great, right? And all of these things mentally for a team, are difficult to handle. And then I think the other big thing is they weren't prepared for how much Andre Sekera meant to the blue line.
Yeah.
And, I think that they assumed they could get by until he returned, and they were wrong. I mean, it was probably a safe assumption to think that, hey, we made it almost to the conference finals the year before. We should be able to at least be middle of the pack while he's gone. And then when he gets back, we'll make a run for the playoffs, right? That, of course, never came to fruition. And when he did come back, he was, he might as well have been sitting as the seventh guy. He was, I'm a Sekera fan, but he was awful when he came back. He just wasn't the same. So, I feel like, Yogi Berra would say it's deja vu all over again. And it scares the crap out of me, but I'm a fan, so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna be at most of the games this year and cheer and hope that one of these PTOs pays off and maybe some of the other guys are better this year. There was, of course, the discussion about Clefbaum being injured pretty much most of the season. Hopefully he comes into camp better. I don't know. We'll see, right?
They're an interesting team to me because
they are.
To me, they're a team that just is constantly overlooked in this division. I mean, it's hard to believe that a team with Connor McDavid can be overlooked, but that's kind of the way it's going. Like, if you poll a majority of people outside of Edmonton and say, are the Oilers going to make the playoffs? I don't think the number would be all that high for the yes, which it shouldn't be that way. When you have the best player in the world, it shouldn't be that way. So I'm not writing them off at all. I think they still are a little below the class of the division, the top 2 or 3 teams. So they've got some work to do. But to just completely write that team off, to me, seems a little bit foolish.
And I agree with you. I think, if I had to guess why most people would act that way, it's because the year prior, those same people were saying this was a team going to the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
And so they're gun shy. And you know what? The Oilers have never done what was expected of them. 2 years ago when they almost made the conference final, it wasn't expected of them. So it's wherever the pundits say they are, they typically end up someplace else.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I much prefer, given the history of our team in the past dozen years, not to go into the season with expectations because I've had expectations 5 or 6 of those dozen years, and it's hard come November when you're on the outside looking in, and everybody's saying, well, typically this time of year we know who the playoff teams are going to be. So yeah, I certainly hope that I always have hope, but expectation is a different thing.
Yeah, we're not sure what expectation means for us.
Yeah. And maybe this will be an interesting year for you. However it shakes out, I'm happy for you and the fans in Las Vegas. I think, and I'm happy for the NHL, right? That the Vegas Golden Knights are part of it. It was, there was no shortage of the old guard that didn't like the way they did an intro or didn't like, the way Vegas did this or that. I say, screw it. The game's changing and you have to adapt and it's about the fans. It's not about, the old game anymore. And Vegas kind of brought that, which Vegas does in so many ways. But they brought Vegas to the NHL and that's great for the team. It's too bad about the Twitter guy. Because he was, I'm a big fan of Twitter and sports Twitter. He was really great. It's too bad that he got let go midway.
I'll follow DraftKings.
Oh yeah,
yeah. He landed with DraftKings.
All right, I will have to follow that. That was definitely a highlight. Anyway, but. Yeah, I do have to run. Thank you again, Ken, for being on. Yeah. Let's plan to redo this and be back on for a full episode. What did I say? November 18th. Maybe we could do it on the in or around there, the 16th or 17th. You get the Oilers on the second half of back to back, so maybe that's good for you.
I hope so.
Yeah. All right. You have a great night. Thanks
Sounds
for
good.
joining.
See ya.